The wind howled across the barren landscape, carrying with it the scent of metal and decay. The sun had long since vanished beyond the horizon, leaving only a sickly pale glow that barely illuminated the endless expanse of jagged, rust-colored dunes. The Ironfall Expanse was a place where life and death danced a twisted tango, where hope could crumble to dust beneath the weight of reality. Derren's throat was dry, cracked from days of walking without water. Sweat dripped from his forehead, only to be seared by the brutal heat of the ever-present, seething sky above. It wasn't the heat that was the worst, though, no. It was the constant dread, the thick, suffocating weight of something unseen, just beyond the edge of perception. The metallic clouds above weren't just a strange phenomenon. They were a harbinger of something far worse. Ironfall. It had been years since the first iron rain had fallen, and now it was a constant, unyielding terror that plagued the land. A terror that had driven most of the world into hiding, leaving only the most desperate, the most foolish, or the most unlucky to venture into the expanse. Some said the rain was a curse, a punishment from the gods. Others claimed it was the product of a failed experiment, a biological weapon gone wrong. Whatever the truth, it was the only truth now. Derren wasn't the only one walking these desolate plains, though. There were others, shadowy figures who crossed his path with a tense, wary silence. He had learned not to ask questions. In the expanse, it was a fool's mistake to engage. Trust was a currency that had no value here. He wrapped his gloved hand around the hilt of his rusted sword, the iron blade scraping against the thick, corroded metal of his gauntlet. The armor was the only thing that kept him alive out here, the only thing that could protect him from the falling rain. The shards of iron that the clouds released could pierce even the thickest of flesh, and he had seen more than his fair share of travelers impaled by them. Struck down in an instant, their bodies left to rust into the land. Another gust of wind blew across the sand, sending a chill through Derren's bones. He drew his cloak tighter around himself and lowered his head, trying to shield his face from the wind's bite. The cloak itself was nothing special, a patched-together relic from his past life, though it had held together longer than he had expected. It was his only remaining connection to the world he once knew, back before the expanse had claimed everything. A crack echoed across the horizon. Derren froze. The sky above darkened suddenly, and then, like a great, monstrous wave, it fell. Iron shards. Hundreds. Thousands. They descended from the heavens like the wrath of a god, a swirling storm of jagged metal raining down in deadly sheets. Derren's heart raced. He dropped to the ground, the weight of the falling iron bearing down on his mind like a heavy fog. He scrambled for cover, his movements slow and sluggish under the heavy armor. His breath caught in his throat as he saw a flash of movement in the distance, a figure running, silhouetted against the chaotic fall of metal. It wasn't a person, though. It was something far worse. A massive, hulking shape emerged from the dunes, its form shifting in and out of view as it danced through the rain of iron. It was no beast he had ever seen before. Its limbs were thin and long, coated in what looked like a mixture of bone and rust. It moved with an eerie, unnatural grace, its body seemingly unaffected by the iron rain that tore into everything around it. Derren's pulse hammered in his ears. He didn't have time to think. He grabbed his sword and pressed his back to the sand, praying to whatever god might listen that he would be overlooked. The creature drew closer, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkening twilight. There was something strange about them, something wrong. It wasn't the gleam of intelligence, but something far colder, far emptier. A hunger that could never be sated. The rain fell faster now, a torrential downpour of sharp, deadly iron. Derren's breath hitched as a shard sliced across his cheek, but he didn't dare move. He had learned long ago that movement in the expanse was a death sentence. The creature was almost upon him. Its thin, bony fingers stretched toward him, claws clacking with every step it took. Derren's mind raced. Should he fight? Should he run? Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but he knew that the expanse didn't allow for such luxuries. Once you ran, you were already dead. He gripped his sword tighter, steadying his breath, his muscles tensing as the creature loomed over him. The world slowed, the sound of the iron rain a distant hum in his ears as he prepared for the inevitable. And then, just as the creature reached for him, it stopped. Derren blinked, his mind struggling to keep up with what his eyes were seeing. The creature's hand hovered just inches above his head, and its eyes, those cold, soulless pits, flickered with a moment of recognition. Or perhaps it was something else. Curiosity? It was hard to tell. A low growl reverberated through the air, but the creature did not advance. Instead, it took a step back, its long limbs unfolding with unnatural slowness. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant clatter of iron as it continued to rain down from the sky. Derren's heart pounded in his chest as he stared up at the creature. What the hell was it? Why hadn't it killed him? For a long moment they remained like that, frozen in time. The creature, standing tall over him, and Derren, kneeling in the sand, sword gripped tightly in his hand. Then, with a sudden, violent motion, the creature turned and vanished into the storm, disappearing as quickly as it had appeared. The wind howled again, and the iron rain fell harder, but the creature was gone. Derren didn't move. He couldn't. His body was frozen in shock, his mind scrambling to make sense of what had just happened. But as he sat there, staring into the darkening sky, one thought echoed in his mind. He had just been spared. For now. The storm didn't last long. Not that the expanse ever truly let up, but the worst of the iron shards finally dwindled to a bitter drizzle, clinking softly against Derren's armor. He rose slowly, testing the weight of his limbs, every muscle screaming from the strain. The encounter with that thing, it had shaken him to the core. His mind raced, imagining what might have happened if it hadn't stopped. Or worse, if it had been hunting him, and only now had paused for reasons he couldn't begin to fathom. Derren's eyes scanned the horizon. The dunes stretched endlessly, rolling waves of sand and rust-colored metal fragments that reflected the pale, poisoned light. Somewhere out there he had to find shelter. Somewhere out there he had to find water, or he would die before the expanse finished its work. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying with it a sound that made his blood run cold. A low, metallic groan, like iron scraping over iron. It wasn't natural, at least not in any sense he had ever known. Derren's grip tightened on his sword as he scanned the shifting sands, but the groan didn't repeat. Instead, silence fell, heavy, suffocating, almost alive. He moved cautiously, each step a careful negotiation with the treacherous landscape. The shards of iron still fell sporadically, embedding themselves in the sand and in the few twisted metal relics scattered across the desert. Rusted skeletons of machinery jutted from the dunes, reminders of the civilization that had once tried to tame this place. Most travelers ignored them, but Derren knew that death could hide in anything here, and he did not dare let his guard down. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost all meaning in the expanse. The sun, or whatever pallid light filtered through the clouds, slid slowly across the sky, and Derren's stomach ached from hunger and thirst. His tongue felt like sandpaper, scraping against his teeth with every wordless sigh. Every step became a battle between his will and his body's demands for rest. Then he saw it, a structure in the distance, barely more than a jagged silhouette against the dim horizon. Derren squinted, trying to make out details. It wasn't alive, he told himself. No creature could create something so deliberate, so angular. He forced his legs forward, the sound of iron rain pattering faintly on his armor like some ghostly applause. The closer he got, the more he realized that the structure wasn't just an abandoned building. It was a fortress of metal, half buried in the sand, rusted beyond recognition. Its walls were jagged, pieced together from scraps and shards, as if scavengers had tried to erect some semblance of protection against the relentless storms. Windows, or what had once been windows, gaped like open wounds, and the doors were twisted on their hinges. The place radiated danger, yet it called to him. Shelter, safety, maybe even answers. Derren approached cautiously, each footstep deliberate. The air smelled of rust and decay, with the faint tang of something chemical or perhaps magical. He could not tell. Inside, Shadows danced along the walls, thrown by the flickering light of what looked like a distant, hidden flame. Or maybe it was a trick of his eyes. The expanse played cruel games on the mind, after all. He stepped inside, and the sound of his boots against the metal floor seemed deafening. The wind had been muted here, but the structure creaked under its own weight, groaning like a living thing. His sword was drawn, his eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. A voice broke the silence, and Derren almost jumped out of his skin. It was soft, raspy, barely audible over the hum of the structure settling into the shifting sands. "You shouldn't have come here." Derren froze. "Who's there?" His voice sounded small, weak, even to himself. There was no answer, only a shuffle in the shadows. A figure emerged, cloaked in dark, tattered robes, face hidden beneath a hood. Derren could see only the faint glint of eyes reflecting the dim light. Why are you here?" he asked, though the question sounded hollow even to him. The figure tilted its head, slow and deliberate. "Because you are lost," it said, its voice almost a whisper. "And lost souls always wander into the expanse. Few survive. Fewer still leave." Derren's chest tightened. He could feel the weight of the storm outside, the threat of iron rain still pressing against his mind like a blade. I need shelter, food, water." The figure laughed, low and mirthless, a sound that grated against his nerves. "Shelter? Perhaps. Food? Maybe. Water? Ha! None survives here." The words were cruel, but there was something else beneath them. A trace of understanding or a warning. "You've been spared," the figure continued, "for reasons you cannot yet comprehend. But the expanse does not forgive. It does not forget. And it is coming for you." Derren felt a shiver run down his spine. Somehow he knew it was true. Somehow he knew that even inside this fortress, even behind these walls, he was not safe. The expanse was patient and it was hungry. The figure stepped closer, the rustling of fabric louder now than the faint clang of the iron rain outside. "You have two choices," it said, voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to echo in Derren's skull. "You can leave and die, or you can stay and face the truth of this place." Derren's grip tightened on his sword. The truth. He had not known what he sought when he first entered the expanse, only survival. But now, perhaps he had no choice but to uncover the secrets it hid, no matter how dark or twisted they might be. The figure reached out a skeletal hand, pointing toward the heart of the fortress. "Follow me, if you dare." Derren swallowed hard. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to run as far from this place as his legs would carry him. But he could not. The expanse had him now. He had no choice but to walk deeper into its metal heart, into the darkness that promised both knowledge and death. And as he followed, the distant iron rain continued to fall, each shard striking the fortress walls with a hollow clang, like a funeral bell tolling for the lost. The fortress interior was worse than Derren had imagined. The walls, once cobbled together from metal scraps, groaned under their own weight, each shudder echoing through the hollow corridors like a death knell. The air was thick, heavy with dust and the metallic tang of rust, and the dim light flickered as though struggling to cling to existence. The figure moved ahead of him with an unnatural grace, silent despite the weight of its presence. Its hand remained extended, guiding him deeper into the fortress, but Derren noticed something strange. The floor beneath them wasn't entirely metal. Bones, fragments of machinery, and shards of iron were embedded into the walkway, forming a grotesque mosaic of past travelers and failed attempts to survive. Derren swallowed hard, stepping carefully to avoid grinding the fragments beneath his boots. He had seen corpses in the dunes before, strewn like broken toys, but this was deliberate. This was a warning. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice sounding too loud in the oppressive silence. "What is this place?" The figure did not answer immediately. Instead, it paused in front of a jagged doorway, the edges lined with spikes of rusted metal. Shadows danced in the corners of his vision, and for a fleeting moment, Derren thought he saw movement. Figures, hunched and writhing, barely distinguishable from the twisted architecture. "This place has many names," the figure said finally, voice low, reverberating through the walls. "But names are meaningless here. It is a crucible, a tomb, a mirror of your own choices. And you are not yet ready to see it all." Derren's stomach turned. He had endured storms, monsters, and the Expanse's merciless deserts, but nothing had prepared him for this. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, but he knew, somehow, that the only way to survive was to keep moving forward. The figure pushed open the jagged doorway, revealing a cavernous hall, its ceiling lost in shadows so thick they seemed to swallow the light. The air was alive here, charged with an almost tangible energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. And then he saw them, corpses or something that had once been human, hung from the walls, suspended by chains forged from iron rain shards. Their skin had fused with the rusted metal, creating grotesque hybrids of flesh and iron. Some twitched, as if alive, though their eyes were empty voids. The stench was unbearable, and Derren gagged, forcing himself to look away. "They were like you," the figure said, voice calm, almost gentle. "Hungry for answers, desperate for survival. They came seeking the truth, and this is what they became." Derren's pulse hammered in his chest. What is the Expanse?" he managed to choke out. The figure's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "The Expanse is not just a desert. It is a living testament to the hunger of the world, a hunger that devours all who step into it unprepared. Tests, punishes, it reshapes, and it remembers." Derren's stomach sank. He had always thought the storms, the iron rain, the creatures were the worst of it. He had been wrong. The Expanse didn't just kill. It twisted, it corrupted, it left scars deeper than flesh. "Why me?" he asked, voice trembling. "Why haven't I ended up like them?" The figure tilted its head. "Because something within you resists, a spark of understanding, a refusal to bow. But even that spark may not be enough. You must learn, you must endure, or the Expanse will claim you, as it has claimed countless before you." A sudden violent tremor shook the hall, and Derren staggered, clutching the edge of a metal column. The sound of grinding metal filled the air, echoing off the walls like the cries of the lost. Iron shards rained down from the ceiling, this time not from outside, but from the fortress itself. The walls were alive. The building groaned, twisted, and shifted as if breathing. Derren realized with a jolt that the fortress wasn't just a structure. It was a living part of the Expanse, a sentient mass of metal and decay designed to trap, test, and devour. "Follow me," the figure urged, moving with unnerving calm as the floor beneath them buckled and shifted. Derren did not hesitate. Survival demanded motion, and fear was only another weight to shed. They entered a narrow corridor lined with what appeared to be metallic mirrors. Derren's reflection stared back at him, but not entirely his own. Twisted, fractured versions of himself shimmered within the polished surfaces, faces stretched and distorted, eyes hollow or bleeding. The figure spoke again, voice a whisper that seemed to echo from all directions. "This is the crucible of truth. Here you face not the Expanse but yourself. And the Expanse, it will always be waiting, watching, hungry. What you see may drive you mad, but do not look away. You must endure." Derren's grip on his sword tightened until his knuckles whitened. His mind screamed to turn and run, to escape this nightmare, but another part of him, the stubborn, defiant part, urged him onward. He had survived storms, monsters, and iron rains. He would not break here, not now. And as he stepped closer to the mirrors, he realized the terrible truth. The Expanse was not just a place. It was a reflection of every fear, every regret, every darkness he had tried to bury inside himself. And if he faltered, if he allowed despair to claim him, it would consume him entirely. The figure's hand hovered over one of the mirrors. "Step forward," it said, "and see what you are truly made of." Derren swallowed, heart hammering. As he took the first step into the reflection, toward a truth he feared might destroy him more surely than the iron rains ever could. The moment Derren stepped into the mirror, the world around him twisted. The walls of the fortress seemed to pulse and sway, as if alive, as though it were breathing in time with his own desperate gasps for air. His reflection in the mirror warped before his eyes, his body stretching unnaturally, his face becoming a twisted mask of what he feared most. His own eyes looked back at him, hollow and wide, like a creature who had seen too much, a creature that had lost its soul long ago. He recoiled instinctively, but his body refused to obey. His feet were planted, glued to the cold metal floor, his muscles locked in place, forcing him to face whatever nightmare the expanse wanted him to confront. The figure beside him, its face still hidden beneath the hood, spoke in that same quiet, unnerving whisper. Look, the expanse feeds on what you hide from the world, what you refuse to confront. It is not enough to survive the storms, to escape the monsters. You must face yourself. Derren's reflection in the mirror flickered again. His own face blurred into another, a twisted version of himself, eyes hollow and mouth stretched wide in silent agony. The reflection opened its mouth, but no sound came out. Only a soft, ominous hum filled the room. Then, as if guided by some invisible force, the reflection's eyes locked onto Derren's. They were filled with such a deep, suffocating sorrow that his chest tightened. His breath caught in his throat. The reflection reached out, its fingers pressing against the cold surface of the mirror. But it was not just reaching for him, it was pulling him in. A sharp pain shot through Derren's head, as though something was tearing at his very thoughts, peeling them open like the skin of an overripe fruit. He gritted his teeth, fighting against the pull, but the reflection was too strong. It was as if the expanse itself had sunk its claws into his mind. Every fear he'd ever had, the ones he'd buried, beneath layers of calloused memories, began to surface. The figure beside him did nothing to intervene. It only watched. The reflection's mouth opened wide, wider than should have been possible, and Derren saw his own words echoing back to him. I have failed. I've always failed. It was his voice, but the words were like poison, thick and suffocating, dripping with regret. The reflection's eyes, his eyes, filled with a kind of hollow despair that Derren had only seen in the bodies of those who had given up. It was his greatest fear, laid bare before him. The fear that he was nothing more than a failure, that no matter how much he tried to survive, he would always be broken, always be hollow. No, Derren gasped, his voice cracking. I'm not like this. But the reflection smiled, a wicked, hollow grin that didn't reach the eyes. You are. You always were. You've seen it, haven't you? What you truly are beneath the armor, beneath the survival instinct. You've been running from it all your life. The mirror rippled like water, and the reflection reached out, pulling him closer. His limbs jerked as if controlled by something outside himself, something dark and malicious. It wasn't just a mirror anymore. It was a doorway, a portal into something far worse than he could comprehend. His mind screamed in protest, but he couldn't look away. The reflection began to split, fragmenting like shattered glass, and suddenly he was seeing not just one version of himself, but hundreds, each one representing a different failure, a different regret. A father he had abandoned, friends he had left to die, a woman, once the center of his world, now lost to the iron rains that had claimed her life. His own past, twisted and cruel, unraveled in front of him. His breath grew shallow. The room around him warped and twisted. He wanted to look away, but the force was stronger now. He was sinking into it, drowning in his own failures. And then, from the darkness, something else took shape. A presence, one that filled the entire room. It was a presence Derren had felt before. A shadow, a thing that haunted the expanse itself. He could feel its weight like a storm cloud hovering over his mind. The air became suffocating, thick with something cold and ancient. The figure beside him stirred, its voice a soft murmur that pierced the oppressive silence. The expanse has seen your choices, your weaknesses. It knows you. Derren wanted to speak, to cry out, but the words caught in his throat. He was surrounded now by reflections, by shadows. Every version of himself was staring back at him, eyes wide and accusing. "You've been here before," the figure said, its voice steady as a funeral bell. "You have seen this place in the deepest corners of your mind. But you were never meant to survive. Not all who come to the expanse live long enough to understand it." Derren's pulse raced, his thoughts spiraling into madness. He was trapped in the crucible, trapped by himself. But then, as if responding to some invisible cue, the reflections stopped moving. The room fell silent once more. The shadows seemed to retreat, slinking back into the corners of the room like hungry beasts finally sated. Derren's vision cleared, and the weight on his chest lifted, if only a little. He gasped for air, but the oppressive presence still lingered, like a storm on the horizon, just waiting to break. "Do you understand now?" the figure asked, its voice still calm, but heavy with something ancient. "The expanse is not just a place. It is a mirror to the soul, to the heart, and it feeds on what you refuse to face. You will never leave this place until you accept the truth of your own darkness." Derren's mind raced. He had seen the horrors of the expanse. Its storms, its creatures, its desolation. But this was different. It wasn't just a test of survival. It was a test of who he was, of what he was willing to face. He wasn't sure if he could bear it. The weight of his own fears, his own failures. He had tried so hard to bury them, to forget them. But the expanse would not let him forget. It was not just a place. It was a judgment, and Derren was the one on trial. The figure beside him stepped back, disappearing into the shadows. "The truth is always waiting," it whispered. "It's only a matter of whether you can face it." Derren stood there, his heart pounding, his breath ragged, as the mirror before him began to crack. Slowly, the reflection of himself that had haunted him began to fade, replaced by something else. Something darker, something far worse. The cracks in the mirror spread, splintering into jagged lines of sharp silver. Derren flinched, stepping back, but the weight of the expanse clung to him, pulling at his bones. He couldn't move, couldn't escape. His reflection, the twisted versions of himself, was fading, but the horror it had unleashed remained, like a virus in his mind. The whispering shadows, the faces that watched him from the corner of his vision clung to him. He gasped, his breath coming in ragged pulls, but no matter how hard he tried to inhale, the air seemed to thicken with an unseen pressure. The floor beneath his feet seemed to bend, as if the very structure of the fortress had become fluid, and Derren was a helpless piece caught in its tide. The walls pulsated, their metallic surface rippling like flesh. The hum of the expanse grew louder, an oppressive cacophony of whispers, low growls, and an unmistakable, grinding hunger. He turned to find the figure, the shadowed guide that had led him this far, but it was gone. Just the echo of its voice remained, lingering in the dark recesses of his mind. "You are not alone here." For a long moment, Derren stood frozen, his body locked in place by something far worse than fear. His thoughts twisted as he tried to make sense of the madness. The expanse, he understood now, was not merely a desert. It was a conscious force, a living thing, a hungry thing. Suddenly, the ground trembled, and a loud crack echoed from the distance, like the sound of something massive breaking apart. Derren's heart skipped a beat. "It's here." From the hallway ahead came the unmistakable scrape of metal dragging across the floor. A low, guttural growl followed. Then, the sound of something heavy slithering through the darkness. Whatever it was, it moved with purpose. It was coming for him. Without thinking, Derren ran. His feet pounded against the shifting floor, each step feeling heavier, as though the expanse itself was trying to pull him down. He didn't look back. The air felt colder, heavier, and the shadows seemed to reach for him like outstretched hands. He was no longer alone. The hallway twisted, narrowing, stretching on forever as if the walls were alive, and the path was changing to trap him. The corners turned at unnatural angles, the darkness swallowing him whole. But Derren pushed forward. He had to keep moving. There was no choice. Ahead, a dim, flickering light appeared. It pulsed weakly like a distant star in the blackness. As Derren neared, he saw it. A door, though what lay behind it he couldn't guess. But it was his only hope, his only chance. With a desperate roar, Derren threw himself at the door, slamming his shoulder into it. The metal groaned in protest, but it gave way, opening into a small, cramped room. Inside, the walls were covered in runes, ancient symbols etched into the stone like scars, each one pulsing with an eerie, dim glow. Derren's heart hammered in his chest. What is this place? Before he could make sense of it, the door behind him slammed shut with a deafening bang. The scrape of metal grew louder. Whatever was hunting him was close. Too close. He stumbled backward into the center of the room, his mind racing. The runes on the walls, they were alive, weren't they? They moved, shifting and twisting, changing as his gaze passed over them. But there was no time to study them. No time for answers. A shadow fell across the doorway. Derren whirled around just in time to see the creature step into the room. It was massive, its body covered in rusted, jagged metal plates, parts of its form still shifting, as though the creature was somehow part of the expanse itself. Its limbs were long, spindly, and covered in scars and deep gouges, as though it had been through endless battles. The eyes, those eyes, glowed faintly in the darkness, a sickly, flickering red, and when it opened its mouth, jagged iron teeth glinted like knives. A deep, unsettling growl rumbled from the creature's throat, and Derren felt his heart freeze. The expanse's hunger was here, but he wasn't going to die in this room. Not like this. Instinct took over. He grabbed the nearest thing, a long, rusted pipe that lay on the floor, and swung it at the creature with all the force he could muster. The pipe connected with its side, but instead of the satisfying crunch he'd expected, the sound was hollow, like hitting solid iron. The creature barely flinched. It tilted its head, studying him with cold, calculating eyes. Then, in a voice that was as much a growl as a whisper, it spoke. "You are not meant to be here." Derren's pulse spiked. I don't want to be here. I just need to get out." The creature's laugh was hollow, echoing through the walls like thunder. "Escape?" it rumbled. "There is no escape." It took a step forward, its claws scraping against the metal floor, each movement deliberate. "You are already lost. You have been lost since the moment you stepped into the expanse." Derren's mind reeled. The creature was right. He had been running from something for so long. His past, his failures, the darkness that had gnawed at him for years. But the expanse had known him, had seen him as it had seen countless others before him. And it had trapped him here with no way out. The creature lunged, its claws aiming for Derren's chest. But he was faster than he had ever been. His feet carried him backward just in time, and the claws missed by inches, raking across the floor with a screeching metallic sound. Derren scrambled to his feet, backing toward the far wall. His mind raced. He couldn't fight this thing. He couldn't fight the expanse itself. But there was one thing he could do. The runes on the wall, the ones that had been shifting before, they were symbols of something ancient. And if the expanse was alive, maybe they were the key to understanding it, to controlling it. But he had no idea how to use them. He glanced back at the creature, now standing motionless in the center of the room. Its eyes gleamed, watching him. The hunger in those eyes was palpable. It knew what he was thinking. The creature's voice boomed in his mind. "You cannot run from yourself. You cannot escape what you have done, what you are." Derren's hands trembled as they reached for the nearest rune. The expanse was pulling him deeper, revealing more than he could bear. The runes, the creature, the truth. He didn't know how much longer he could keep his mind together. But he knew one thing for sure. The expanse wasn't just trying to kill him. It was trying to remake him, to force him into a new shape, one that could never escape. Derren's mind raced as his fingers brushed against the glowing runes. They pulsed under his touch, sending a strange, electric shock through his body. but he couldn't let the pain distract him. The creature's eyes bored into him, and the hunger emanating from its silent presence made the air feel thick, too thick to breathe. For a moment, the runes flickered, as though they were recognizing him. The dark symbols twisted and writhed like serpents under his touch, patterns shifting in ways that made no sense, only to dissolve and reform. Derren's heart hammered in his chest, every beat echoing like a death knell. The creature took a slow step forward, its jagged claws scraping against the floor, closer. So close now that Derren could smell the metallic rot of its breath. It was a slow, deliberate movement, like it was savoring the moment, toying with him. "You think you can stop it?" The voice slithered into his mind again, the words a rasping whisper that felt as though it were scraping against his thoughts. "You think you can control it, this place? You are as much a part of it as the rust on the metal, as the blood in your veins. There is no escape. There is only submission." Derren's fingers pressed harder into the rune, desperation forcing his hand to stay steady despite the tremors coursing through him. He had no idea what it meant, no idea what the symbols could do. But something in him, something buried deep within, told him he had to act. The creature took another step forward, and then another. Its breath was low, like a growl caught in its throat, and Derren's mind snapped into clarity. The expanse wasn't just a place. It was a force. And this creature, this thing, it wasn't some random predator. It was an agent of the expanse, a manifestation of its hunger. But the expanse itself, Derren didn't understand it yet, but he knew that it didn't just consume, it transforms. It twisted what it touched into something else, something unrecognizable. And if he didn't stop it now, it would claim him as it had claimed the others. With a burst of resolve, Derren pressed his palm flat against the rune. The symbols flared brightly for a moment, blinding him with a light that seemed to come from the deepest depths of the expanse itself. For an instant, the world went still. Then the ground trembled, a violent, earth-shattering quake that rattled the walls and shook the very bones of the fortress. The creature recoiled, its claws scraping the floor, its eyes widening in confusion. It turned its head, as though sensing something shifting within the expanse. Derren's heart raced as the symbols on the wall pulsed with a dark, growing energy. The fortress itself seemed to come alive, the very metal walls groaning as though they were alive. The expanse responded to the disturbance. The creature snarled, its jagged teeth flashing in the dim light as it took another step toward him. But the runes, they were beginning to spread. The symbols were rippling outward from where his hand had touched, crawling across the floor like dark veins, a web of power growing stronger with every second. Derren stumbled backward, gasping for breath, as the walls seemed to pulse, the room shaking like the belly of some massive, living beast. The expanse was fighting back. It was responding to his touch, to his defiance. But was it enough? With each passing moment, the creature grew more agitated. It was circling him now, its claws clicking against the floor like a predator testing its prey. Could sense the shift, the resistance, and it was hungry, hungry for his surrender. "You cannot escape," it growled again, the voice deep and cold, like a blade being drawn from its sheath. "You are nothing but a cog in the machine of the expanse. It will break you, piece by piece, and then it will consume what remains." Derren felt his spine stiffen, the words striking deep into his chest. The creature was right. He had been running from his past, from the mistakes that had haunted him. He had been surviving, yes, but had he truly been living? Or had he simply been waiting for the expanse to take him? His fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword, the rusted blade heavy in his grasp. The creature's eyes locked onto him, its every movement predatory, like it could sense the conflict rising within him. The expanse was playing its game, a game of survival of mind and will. It wanted him to break, to submit, but he couldn't. He wouldn't. Derren's pulse quickened. The expanse had shown him his worst fears, his deepest regrets. But it hadn't shown him everything. There was a part of him, buried deep beneath the layers of shame, guilt, and pain, that refused to surrender. That part of him was still alive, and it was screaming now, "No," he whispered, his voice hoarse with defiance. "No, I won't let you take me." The runes flared once more, brighter than before, their glow casting long shadows across the room. The walls groaned in protest as the fortress itself seemed to shudder in the grip of something far stronger than mere metal and stone. The expanse was pulling at him, dragging him deeper into its core, but Derren fought back with every ounce of his strength. The creature lunged. Time seemed to slow as Derren's sword sliced through the air. He swung with everything he had, the blade catching the creature's clawed hand. The impact sent a shockwave through his body, and the creature howled in pain. It staggered back, its glowing eyes flashing in fury. But the expanse was relentless. The walls closed in, the floor beneath him cracking and shifting. It was pulling at him, trying to bury him in its depths. And then, a voice, louder than the creature's growl, boomed through his mind. "You are nothing. You are nothing without it." The world collapsed. For a moment, Derren felt as though he were falling through the very fabric of the expanse itself, through a void of endless, shifting darkness. The air was thick with iron and decay. The expanse was consuming him, pulling him into its endless hunger. But through the chaos, through the darkness, something inside him snapped. The sword, his only connection to the outside world, to the life he had once known, glowed with a strange, ethereal light. The runes on the walls, now swirling together in impossible patterns, seemed to recognize it, to reach out to it. And Derren, holding the sword tightly in his hand, realized what he had to do. He was no longer just a man surviving in the expanse. He was the expanse. The realization hit him like a storm. He wasn't merely trapped in the expanse. He was part of it. The expanse didn't just take. It shaped, transformed. And now he had the power to reshape it. The creature lunged once more, but this time Derren was ready. He thrust the sword forward, the tip glowing with a brilliance that felt as though it came from the heart of the storm itself. The creature's roar echoed as the blade plunged into its chest, the power of the expanse surging through him, through the sword, into the very core of the beast. The creature exploded in a shower of rusted iron and darkness, its body disintegrating into nothing. But the expanse was not finished. The walls trembled violently. The runes pulsed, their light flashing erratically, and Derren realized that he had done it. He had broken the cycle. But breaking it came at a price. The expanse was not finished with him. It would never be finished with him. He was a part of it now. Derren stood in the center of the room, his body trembling with exhaustion. But his mind was sharp, clearer than it had ever been. The creature was gone, obliterated, disintegrated into rust and dust, but its death had come at a cost. He could feel it now, deep inside him. Something had changed, something irreversible. The sword, still glowing with the remnants of the expanse's power, hummed in his grip. He could feel its energy coursing through his veins like fire, hot and unforgiving. It was as if the weapon had fused with his very soul, its power now a part of him. He could hear the whispers of the expanse in his mind, calling to him, guiding him. The hunger that had once been so terrifying, now pulsed like a steady rhythm in his chest, a beat he could not escape. But as much as the expanse had shaped him, it had also broken him. The walls of the room, the runes on the floor, the very air itself, they were all part of the expanse, a reflection of its endless hunger. And now he was bound to it, bound to something that would never be sated, something that would always demand more. The floor beneath him groaned again, as though the fortress itself was alive, shifting to acknowledge his presence. The dark whispers returned, louder now, filling his mind with 1,000 voices all speaking at once. You are part of it. You are the expanse. Derren staggered backward, the weight of the words settling into his chest like a stone. He couldn't breathe. The hunger, the gnawing, insatiable desire for more. He could feel it in his bones, in his blood. It was the expanse itself, alive in him, reaching for something it could never have. He shook his head violently, as if trying to dislodge the voices, but they only grew louder. The expanse was in him now, and he was in it. There was no separating them anymore. He could feel the weight of the metal storm outside, the iron rain falling endlessly, the creatures that roamed the vast wasteland. They were all part of him. He was part of it. He closed his eyes, pressing his fingers to his temples as if trying to block out the deafening chorus in his head. The power was overwhelming, too much to comprehend. But amidst the chaos, something caught his attention. A memory, a feeling. It was fleeting at first, like a whisper from a distant past, but it was real. It was the one thing that didn't belong here. Her face, Lena, the woman he had lost to the expanse. For a moment, the hunger inside him quieted. The whispers receded, and he was left with the memory of her. Her smile, her warmth, the way her eyes had once looked at him with hope. The thing that had driven him to the expanse in the first place. To find her, to survive. But survival, he realized now, had come at a price. He had given up everything for it. He had surrendered pieces of himself, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. He was no longer the man he had been. He was something else, something worse. The runes on the floor began to glow brighter, and the walls of the fortress shook violently, as if the expanse was reacting to his inner turmoil. The hunger inside him flared again, like a fire consuming everything in its path. He could feel it calling to him, pulling at him, urging him to embrace it. Feed the expanse. He staggered toward the wall, his hand gripping the sword tighter, his knuckles white with strain. The expanse was still there, pressing against him from all sides. It was in the walls, in the air, in his very body. There was no escape from it now. He had become the thing he had feared the most. And yet, even in the face of that truth, a part of him refused to give in. A part of him still fought. A distant echo of Lena's voice, soft, familiar, comforting, floated into his mind, like a whisper across a long-forgotten dream. Don't let it take you, Derren. It was a plea he hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. He closed his eyes, and for the briefest of moments, he could almost see her, standing before him, reaching out her hand. But then the vision faded. The hunger returned. He opened his eyes, the burning pain in his chest almost unbearable. He could feel the expanse inside him, coiling and thrashing like a serpent, its power consuming him from the inside out. He couldn't do this. He couldn't let the expanse win. Derren's grip on the sword tightened, and a surge of strength, a raw, untamed force, pushed through him. The sword began to hum louder, its blade glowing with a strange, cold light. The power of the expanse was flowing through him, but this time he wasn't just accepting it. He was fighting it. The whispers, those terrible voices, faltered for a brief moment. Fight, Derren whispered to himself. Fight it. With a roar, he swung the sword through the air, slicing through the air around him. The room exploded in a burst of light, and the walls trembled. The expanse reacted. It shrieked, as if in pain. And then the walls cracked. The fortress began to collapse, the very foundation of the expanse shaking as it tried to fight back. Derren's heart raced, but his mind was clear. The expanse could not control him. He would not let it consume him, not like it had consumed everyone else, not like it had consumed Lena. He ran, pushing through the collapsing walls, the ground beneath him shaking violently. His feet moved faster than they had ever moved before, the power of the expanse surging within him, lending him strength. But it wasn't the expanse driving him anymore. It was something else, something deeper, something human. The corridors twisted around him, shifting with every step, but he kept going, pushing forward. The hunger, still gnawing at him, still whispering in his ear, was quieter now, faint. His resolve was stronger. He was beginning to understand it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about freedom. The air was thick with the scent of rust and decay, but the walls were starting to crack. There was a break in the fortress, a way out, and then he saw it, the exit, a small opening in the wall. Beyond it, the wasteland stretched out before him, a desolate expanse of sand and iron. He wasn't free yet. The Expanse had not released him. It would never release him. But Derren had made a choice. He would never be the Expanse's prisoner. Again. With one final step, he crossed the threshold. The storm hit him immediately. The iron rain, thick as nails, pelted his body with a force that threatened to tear him apart. But he didn't stop. He ran. The Expanse was still there. It would always be there. But Derren knew one thing for certain. It was not in control anymore. The iron rain slashed against Derren's body, the sharp metal shards digging into his skin like 1,000 needles. Stung, each drop a searing pain, but he kept running. He had to keep moving, had to push forward into the storm that howled around him, its wind tearing at his clothes and his flesh. The Expanse was a living nightmare, and every step he took into it seemed to pull him deeper into its grip. The storm was alive, the sky churning with thick, metallic clouds that loomed like some forgotten god, watching and waiting. There was no shelter, no respite. The desert stretched out before him, endless and barren, a wasteland of rust and decay. But Derren couldn't stop. Not now. He had felt it the moment he crossed the threshold of the fortress. The Expanse didn't just want to consume his body. It wanted his will. It wanted his soul. And as he ran, he could feel it clawing at him, trying to drag him back into its cold, crushing embrace. The hunger inside him had not gone away. It was a gnawing, insistent presence, always there, always demanding. It's inside you, it whispered. You can't escape it. The pain from the rain, the cold of the wind, the endless stretch of the desert. None of it mattered. The hunger was all that consumed him now. It was a constant, a presence in the back of his mind that would never be sated. Not by survival, not by running. The ground beneath his feet was shifting, unstable, as if the very earth was alive. Every step he took felt like it might be his last. The sand had begun to turn to iron, jagged shards sticking out of the ground like teeth waiting to tear him apart. He stumbled over a rise, his feet slipping on the rusted ground, and then he saw it. A silhouette in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow, barely visible through the heavy storm. But as he moved closer, the shape began to take form. A structure, an old ruin, a shattered monument to something long forgotten. It was tall, twisted, and made of rusted metal, like the Expanse itself. Derren's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a ruin. He had seen this structure before. It had been in his dreams. The same nightmare that had followed him for years, the one that had always ended with the sight of this very monument, standing alone in the endless desert. It was real. He approached it slowly, his steps tentative, the air thick with the hum of power. The hunger inside him seemed to quiet, as though the Expanse had momentarily lost interest in him. The storm around him still raged, but there was something about this place, something that called to him, something familiar. He reached the base of the monument, his fingers brushing against the rusted surface of the metal. The moment his skin made contact, a violent surge of energy shot through him, and the hunger flared back to life, fiercer than ever. It was as though the Expanse had recognized him, acknowledged him as its own. The monument, it wasn't just a structure. It was a gateway. The metal around him began to shimmer, the rust receding in places to reveal strange symbols etched into the surface, glowing faintly in the storm's dark light. The runes from the fortress, the ones that had once seemed so alien to him, were here as well, etched into the monument's core. They pulsed with an energy he could feel in his bones. He had seen these runes before, but now he understood. The Expanse was more than a desert, more than a storm. It was a network, a living, breathing web of power, of energy, and of souls. The creature he had killed in the fortress, it had been part of it. And now this monument, this gateway was calling him, drawing him in. You've come far. The voice in his head spoke again, its tone cold and unfeeling. You've fought, resisted, but you will never escape what you are, what you've become. Derren closed his eyes, fighting against the growing ache in his chest, but he could feel it now. The Expanse was inside him, not just in his mind, but in his very flesh. It had marked him, and every step he took brought him closer to its final purpose. "What do you want from me?" he thought, his voice trembling with a mixture of defiance and desperation. "What is this?" The whispers in his mind grew louder, an overwhelming chorus that drowned out his thoughts. "You are the key. The expanse lives through you. You will open the way. You will bring it to life again." He could hear the sounds of it now, the way the wind howled through the iron rain, the way the storm screamed in hunger. The expanse wasn't just a place. It was an ancient force, a forgotten god that had been waiting for the right moment, for the right person, to unlock it. And Derren had been chosen. The ground beneath him shifted again, a tremor running through the earth, and the monument before him began to open. The rusted metal creaked and groaned as it shifted, revealing a dark, yawning abyss inside. The gateway had been unlocked. The expanse was inviting him in. Derren's heart raced. The storm was furious now, its winds shrieking, as if protesting what was about to happen. But there was no turning back. Not now. The expanse had already claimed him. It had already shaped him. And now he had to face whatever came next. The hunger inside him was relentless. It pushed him forward, into the darkness, as the monument's interior swallowed him whole. The expanse wasn't just a desert anymore. It was something worse, something older, something that was reaching out for him, for all of humanity, for everything in its path. The walls of the monument were covered in more symbols, more runes, swirling in intricate patterns. The air was thick with the presence of something ancient, something sentient, like a million eyes watching him from the shadows. The deeper he went, the more he could feel it. A vast, pulsing power waiting to be unleashed. He stepped into the core of the monument, and the darkness enveloped him. "You cannot escape it." The voice spoke again, but this time it was different. There was no hunger in it, no malice, just a cold, indifferent certainty. This is where it begins. This is where it ends. The storm outside screamed louder, the iron rain now a constant, a reminder of the weight pressing down on him. The expanse had given him power. It had shaped him into something more. But now it was time for him to choose. Would he become the savior the expanse wanted, or would he finally break free of its grasp? Derren stood at the center of the monument, the very heart of the expanse, his sword still glowing in his hand. The darkness around him pulsed with the rhythm of the storm, the rusted walls echoing with a sound that was both a song and a scream. It was now or never. The iron rain slashed against Derren's body, the sharp metal shards digging into his skin like 1,000 needles. Stung, each drop a searing pain, but he kept running. He had to keep moving, had to push forward into the storm that howled around him, its wind tearing at his clothes and his flesh. The expanse was a living nightmare, and every step he took into it seemed to pull him deeper into its grip. The storm was alive, the sky churning with thick, metallic clouds that loomed like some forgotten god, watching and waiting. There was no shelter, no respite. The desert stretched out before him, endless and barren, a wasteland of rust and decay. But Derren couldn't stop. Not now. He had felt it the moment he crossed the threshold of the fortress. The expanse didn't just want to consume his body. It wanted his will. It wanted his soul. And as he ran, he could feel it clawing at him, trying to drag him back into its cold, crushing embrace. The hunger inside him had not gone away. It was a gnawing, insistent presence, always there, always demanding. "It's inside you," it whispered. "You can't escape it." The pain from the rain, the cold of the wind, the endless stretch of the desert, none of it mattered. The hunger was all that consumed him now. It was a constant, a presence in the back of his mind that would never be sated. Not by survival, not by running. The ground beneath his feet was shifting, unstable, as if the very earth was alive. Every step he took felt like it might be his last. The sand had begun to turn to iron, jagged shards sticking out of the ground like teeth waiting to tear him apart. He stumbled over a rise, his feet slipping on the rusted ground, and then he saw it, a silhouette in the distance. At first, it was just a shadow, barely visible through the heavy storm. But as he moved closer, the shape began to take form. A structure, an old ruin, a shattered monument to something long forgotten. It was tall, twisted, and made of rusted metal, like the expanse itself. Derren's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a ruin. He had seen this structure before. It had been in his dreams. The same nightmare that had followed him for years, the one that had always ended with the sight of this very monument, standing alone in the endless desert. It was real. He approached it slowly, his steps tentative, the air thick with the hum of power. The hunger inside him seemed to quiet, as though the expanse had momentarily lost interest in him. The storm around him still raged, but there was something about this place, something that called to him, something familiar. He reached the base of the monument, his fingers brushing against the rusted surface of the metal. The moment his skin made contact, a violent surge of energy shot through him, and the hunger flared back to life, fiercer than ever. It was as though the expanse had recognized him, acknowledged him as its own. The monument, it wasn't just a structure. It was a gateway. The metal around him began to shimmer, the rust receding in places to reveal strange symbols etched into the surface, glowing faintly in the storm's dark light. The runes from the fortress, the ones that had once seemed so alien to him, were here as well, etched into the monument's core. They pulsed with an energy he could feel in his bones. He had seen these runes before, but now he understood. The expanse was more than a desert, more than a storm. It was a network, a living, breathing web of power, of energy, and of souls. The creature he had killed in the fortress, it had been part of it. And now this monument, this gateway was calling him, drawing him in. "You've come far." The voice in his head spoke again, its tone cold and unfeeling. "You've fought, resisted, but you will never escape what you are, what you've become." Derren closed his eyes, fighting against the growing ache in his chest, but he could feel it now. The expanse was inside him, not just in his mind, but in his very flesh. It had marked him, and every step he took brought him closer to its final purpose. "What do you want from me?" he thought, his voice trembling with a mixture of defiance and desperation. "What is this?" The whispers in his mind grew louder, an overwhelming chorus that drowned out his thoughts. "You are the key. The expanse lives through you. You will open the way. You will bring it to life again." He could hear the sounds of it now, the way the wind howled through the iron rain, the way the storm screamed in hunger. The expanse wasn't just a place. It was an ancient force, a forgotten god that had been waiting for the right moment, for the right person, to unlock it. And Derren had been chosen. The ground beneath him shifted again, a tremor running through the earth, and the monument before him began to open. The rusted metal creaked and groaned as it shifted, revealing a dark, yawning abyss inside. The gateway had been unlocked. The expanse was inviting him in. Derren's heart raced. The storm was furious now, its winds shrieking, as if protesting what was about to happen. But there was no turning back. Not now. The expanse had already claimed him. It had already shaped him. And now he had to face whatever came next. The hunger inside him was relentless. It pushed him forward, into the darkness, as the monument's interior swallowed him whole. The expanse wasn't just a desert anymore. It was something worse, something older, something that was reaching out for him, for all of humanity, for everything in its path. The walls of the monument were covered in more symbols, more runes, swirling in intricate patterns. The air was thick with the presence of something ancient, something sentient, like a million eyes watching him from the shadows. The deeper he went, the more he could feel it. A vast, pulsing power waiting to be unleashed. He stepped into the core of the monument, and the darkness enveloped him. "You cannot escape it." The voice spoke again, but this time it was different. There was no hunger in it, no malice, just a cold, indifferent certainty. This is where it begins. This is where it ends. The storm outside screamed louder, the iron rain now a constant, a reminder of the weight pressing down on him. The expanse had given him power. It had shaped him into something more. But now it was time for him to choose. Would he become the savior the Expanse wanted, or would he finally break free of its grasp? Derren stood at the center of the monument, the very heart of the Expanse, his sword still glowing in his hand. The darkness around him pulsed with the rhythm of the storm, the rusted walls echoing with a sound that was both a song and a scream. It was now or never.